I used to think airports at night were boring. Quiet, a little lonely, but safe. The kind of places where nothing memorable ever happened. Once the last flights left and the crowds disappeared, the terminals seemed to fall asleep. Restaurants closed their shutters, gift shops locked their doors, and the only sounds left were vending machines humming to themselves and cleaning equipment moving slowly across empty floors. It wasn't exciting, but after years of working night cargo, I actually preferred it that way. There was something comforting about the routine. Load the freight, unload the freight, fill out paperwork, and count the hours until sunrise. Even during storms, power outages, or the occasional emergency, airports always felt predictable to me. They were lonely sometimes, sure, but never frightening. I thought I had experienced every kind of silence an airport could offer. Then I picked up a shift at Dunmore Field. It looked like just another small airport, forgotten by everyone except the people paid to keep it running. I expected another long, uneventful night. After one shift at Dunmore Field, I don't think that anymore. I've worked night cargo for 5 years. I thought I'd cataloged every kind of quiet an airport can hold: the dead hum of vending machines, the squeak of a floor buffer at 3 a.m., the strange hollowness of a building made for thousands but holding 3. I was wrong. There is a quiet that waits for you to notice it before it does anything back. The fog at Dunmore Field didn't roll in. It arrived, all at once, like something exhaling over the whole valley. By the time I parked, I couldn't see past the hood of my car. The lot lights turned the fog a bruised, sickly yellow. My breath came out in slow gray ropes that hung a second too long, as if the air itself had thickened to hold them. Dunmore was barely an airport: 2 gates, one vending machine humming a note it could never quite reach. My shift didn't start for 3 hours. I had nowhere to be, and a building that felt, the moment I stepped through its doors, like it had been waiting far longer than I had. I want to be clear about what kind of person I am. I don't spook easily. I've worked through blackouts, storm warnings, a bomb scare that turned out to be a forgotten gym bag. None of it ever sat in my chest the way that first minute inside Dunmore did. Nothing had happened yet. Nothing even looked wrong. It was just a feeling low, attentive, like the building had clocked me walking in. Like I'd stepped into the middle of a conversation that had already started without me. The woman at the security desk introduced herself as Carol. 50s, tired in a way that had nothing to do with sleep. She gave me a small nod, not a welcome, more an acknowledgement, and returned to her paperwork. I sat in the front row of chairs. The overhead lights buzzed at a frequency that should have felt ordinary and didn't. Down the long corridor, a floor cleaning machine drifted back and forth on its own, tracing the same 6 feet of tile, over and over. And past it, at the end of the hall, Gate 9. A crooked sign read "Closed for repairs." Every other dark gate sat the way a closed gate should dead. Gate 9's lights were on. Not flickering, not dying. Steady. Warm. The only warm light in a building full of cold ones. I didn't think much of it. Not yet. I only noted, distantly, that it was strange for a closed gate to bother staying lit. Stranger still that no one else seemed to notice. Or care. A little after midnight, mostly to hear a voice that wasn't my own, I asked Carol about it. Why is Gate 9 still lit if it's closed? She paused, the particular pause of someone choosing which version of the truth to hand over. That's just how it is. Flat. Final. A line worn smooth from overuse, until it no longer sounded like a sentence so much as a password. How long's it been closed? Long time. She said nothing else. Her radio crackled with a static that had rhythm to it almost like breathing, and then she walked away before I could ask more. Outside, the fog had pressed itself flat against the glass, thick enough to reduce the runway lights to smudges with no shape. I checked my phone, 1:04 a.m. I was certain I'd checked it minutes earlier, at 12:50. 14 minutes had passed, and they felt thick, like I'd been wading through water that was almost, but not quite, still. Curiosity is a stupid, reliable thing. By 1:20 I was walking the corridor toward Gate 9, past the cleaning machine, which paused 1 full second as I passed. Long enough to notice. A rope blocked the gate. A handwritten sign, "Do not enter." Behind it, the seating area looked wrong before I could name why. Then I saw it, the chairs weren't facing the windows. They'd been turned inward, toward each other, in small clusters, the arrangement of people mid-conversation. Furniture doesn't talk to itself. Cleaning crews don't turn chairs to face one another and then rope off the gate, leaving the lights burning brighter than anywhere else in the building, like something was being kept ready. There should have been nothing to smell. There was no plane outside. But under the terminal's stale air, I caught it jet fuel, thin and sour, and beneath that, something sharper. Ozone. The smell before a lightning strike. Except there was no storm. No static charge in the air. Just fog so dense it had swallowed the runway whole. I stood there longer than I meant to. When I next checked my phone, it read 1:46. I didn't remember the missing 20 minutes. I told myself I'd just been thinking. But thinking doesn't usually leave your mouth dry and your hands cold. And it doesn't usually come paired with the distinct, unwelcome sense that whatever sat behind that rope had been thinking back. I didn't tell Carol what I'd seen. I still can't say why. Around 2 a.m., the cleaning machine stopped mid-hallway, the way a sentence stops when someone cuts it off. I turned. A man stood 30 feet away, just past where the light gave out to shadow. Maintenance jacket. Head down. He gave a small nod, not a greeting, more the nod you give someone you'd already expected to see, then turned and walked toward Gate 9 without a sound. No footsteps. I noticed that only after he was already gone. No footsteps, on hard tile, in an empty hall. At 2:15 I texted my sister, mostly so someone outside the building would know where I was. "This airport's creepy, LOL. Counting down till my shift." I typed it like it was nothing, even though some part of me knew I was making the place sound smaller than it felt. She replied something ordinary. I don't remember what. I remember that it didn't help. At 2:30 the overhead speakers cracked on with a wet pop. Then nothing, just static, low and steady, for almost 30 seconds. It had texture, if you listened too closely. Almost like a crowd of voices pressed flat together. Then it cut off mid-static, as if something had simply lost interest. I found Carol at the front desk, arms crossed, staring up at the speaker like she expected an apology from it. Is that normal? Old wiring. She didn't believe it either. I could hear that in her voice. I asked her outright if something bad had happened here. She was quiet long enough that I thought she might not answer at all. Her shoulders dropped slightly, like the question had lifted some weight off her just by being spoken aloud, even though answering it would cost her something else. I had the sense, watching her, that she'd been waiting years for someone new to finally ask. And dreading it in equal measure. Then she told me. A fire near Gate 9, almost 20 years back. 2 ground crew workers didn't make it out. A third survived barely and never set foot on a runway again. Not at Dunmore. Not anywhere. The man who pulled him out still works here, she said. I asked if that was the man I'd seen by the cleaning machine. She didn't answer. She just looked at me with an expression I didn't like, not fear exactly, but the tired look of someone watching a scene she'd already sat through too many times, knowing the ending, knowing she couldn't change it. Stay away from that gate, she said, and walked out into the fog, leaving me with the buzzing lights and a smell of fuel that had no business being there. I should have listened. I think some part of me knew that even then, and went anyway. I've asked myself why 3 hours of boredom outweighed every warning a building could give a person. Curiosity doesn't quite cover it. It felt less like I wanted to look, and more like something at the end of that hallway wanted to be looked at, and I happened to be the one standing there. My shift was still nearly an hour out. I told myself I was just stretching my legs. I walked the corridor anyway, toward that warm, steady light. Somewhere along the way, I stopped pretending I had a real reason. The rope at gate 9 had been moved, not torn down, pushed, deliberately, the way you'd shove something out of your own path. The chairs had turned again. Now they faced the windows, toward a runway swallowed entirely by fog. The glass looked less like weather and more like something painted gray. The lights buzzed at a lower pitch, the flicker old bulbs get right before they die for good. The fuel smell was stronger here. Beneath it, something burnt, faint, slow, like a smolder that never fully caught. Just look. Then leave. A figure sat in the front row, facing the glass. Maintenance jacket. Head down. Hands folded in its lap, like someone waiting for an appointment already long overdue. "You're not supposed to be here," I said, mostly because the silence needed something put into it. It didn't move. I said it again, louder. My voice came out thin in that wide, warm, empty space. The light's buzz shifted, not louder, just different, a note sliding flat. Behind me, the cleaning machine had gone silent. I realized I'd stopped hearing the vending machine too. The whole building had gone quiet in a way that felt less like silence and more like everything was holding its breath in time with mine. When the figure turned, the jacket was burned down, one entire side fabric blackened, curled at the edges, the kind of damage that should have carried a sharp smell. Instead it smelled old. Long cold. A fire that ended decades ago and was never properly cleared away. The face was calm. That was the worst part. Not melted, not grotesque, just calm, in a way that didn't belong anywhere near a face that still. The eyes never landed on me. They tracked something just past my shoulder, the way you'd watch someone approaching from behind a person you were talking to. The temperature dropped all at once, the same way the fog had arrived, as if the cold had simply made up its mind. The figure stood. The screen above the gate went black, flickered, and came back. Where a flight number should have been, one word repeated, over and over, as if it needed to be sure I'd seen it. Boarding. There had been no flight at gate 9. Not in 19 years. I don't remember running. I only remember being back at the front doors, lungs burning, with Carol already walking toward me as if she'd been listening for exactly this. I told her everything. The jacket. The eyes that wouldn't settle on me. The screen. She didn't look surprised. She looked like someone confirming a fear she'd carried quietly for years, hoping this particular night wouldn't be the one to prove her right. She didn't ask me to repeat any of it, which struck me as strange even in the middle of everything else that was strange. People usually want the details again, want to hunt for cracks in the story. Carol just nodded, checking items off a list she already knew by heart. Somewhere in that nodding, I understood I wasn't the first person to stand in that lobby and tell her this. And I wouldn't be the last. She stayed close to me until 4 a.m. Right before I clocked in, she said one more thing, so quiet I almost lost it under the building's hum. "He doesn't usually let people get that close." I didn't ask who he was. I've turned that over often since. I think some part of me had already decided I didn't want the answer said out loud. Some things stay smaller if nobody ever puts them into words. I finished that shift cold straight through, even though the thermostat read 71 the entire time. At home, I searched for Dunmore Field online. One short article, 18 years old, buried deep in the results. A fire near Gate 9. 2 ground crew workers dead. 1 survivor, badly burned, who never worked a runway again. The airport reopened 2 days later stated plainly, like that detail was meant to make everything feel resolved. The article never named the survivor. I noticed that I wanted his name more than I wanted to admit. The wanting didn't feel like curiosity anymore. It felt like a hook, already set deep. Here is the part one haven't told anyone. Not even Carol. When I got home, I checked my phone. The text to my sister, "This airport's creepy," LOL was still there. But beneath it, timestamped 2:31, sat a second message I never typed. 3 words, no punctuation, sent from my own number while I'd been standing at that desk, listening to static. Don't let him. My sister had replied. Don't let who? You okay? I never saw that reply arrive. No missed notification. No unlock. Nothing, just a message I never wrote, sitting quietly in a thread, sent from a phone that had stayed in my pocket the entire time. I never told her what it meant. I still don't know. I've turned those 3 words over so many times they've stopped feeling like words at all, more like a sound I can no longer place, the way any word loses its shape if you repeat it long enough. I still work night cargo. But I take the long way now, just to avoid Dunmore Field entirely. Worse route. Some weeks, worse pay. I've never explained why to dispatch. They stopped asking after the second time I turned down the assignment. Sometimes, on a slow shift somewhere else, standing in some other quiet hallway under its own buzzing lights, I think about that man still walking Dunmore's halls, night after night, the way Carol said he does. I don't know what he's keeping there. I don't know what's keeping him there. I don't know if that burned jacket, that calm and wrong face, belonged to the man who survived, or to one of the 2 who never made it out. Carol never said which. I've stopped letting myself guess. What I do know is what that screen said, looping in that warm, lit, empty gate, while the fog outside swallowed every runway light whole. There was no flight that night. There was no flight the night before. There's probably no flight the night after. And I know that whoever sat in that chair, facing a runway, and couldn't possibly see through all that fog, is still there. Still waiting. Still boarding something that was never, not once in 19 years, going to land. Some nights, when my apartment goes quiet in that strange hour before sunrise, I check my phone before I sleep. Just to make sure nothing has been sent that I don't remember sending. So far, there's been nothing. So far.